Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we are going to gather around the virtual water cooler and talk about what we've been up to. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor and chief film critic, Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
All right, Chris, I know that I put out a call at the top of an episode earlier this week for listeners to rate and review this podcast, but I wanted to follow up and say that if you give us a 5-star rating and write a review, I will read the review on the show. I want to incentivize people to take a couple minutes and help us out because that helps us keep the show alive. So let's give this a shot and see how it goes. And don't make me regret this, people. So, all right, let's get into, we haven't really been doing much of anything, but you've been reading something, Chris. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I just finished a book called The War for Late Night by Bill Carter. And this is a book about, I'm sure you remember this, Ben, because it was a big deal. But it's about how very briefly Conan O'Brien took over The Tonight Show. And then less than a year later, Jay Leno came back and took the show back. And it's all about like what happened behind the scenes. This is actually a follow-up book. Bill Carter wrote a book called The Late Shift, which was turned into a HBO movie. And that is about how Leno and Letterman both wanted the Tonight Show, and ultimately Jay Leno got the show. And so this is sort of like a sequel to that because, you know, it was almost like the same thing happened again. Jay Leno and his scheming behind the scenes and whatever, you know. And this was an interesting book, mostly because I knew the broad strokes of it. I don't know about you, Ben, but I was a big Conan O'Brien fan. I feel like a lot of people our age were big Conan O'Brien fans. You know, Conan O'Brien, he took over the Dave Letterman. Dave Letterman had the show on after the Tonight Show, and after the Tonight Show went to Jay Leno, Dave Letterman jumped to CBS from NBC, and they gave Dave Letterman's old slot, which is the 12:35 slot, to Conan O'Brien. And Conan O'Brien just sort of made that show his own. You know, he had this very funny, very irreverent sort of style of humor, and it was just a really weird, surreal sort of late night show. And you know, when I was a younger man and I could stay up past midnight, I would watch Conan's show, and it was a huge deal. And when it was announced that Conan was taking over the night show, it was sort of like this triumphant moment, like, oh man, this is amazing. And NBC never really gave him a chance. His ratings were not, admittedly were not great, but it's like, Jay Leno's ratings were also not great when he took over the show, and eventually he came out on top. But I will say of this, the book, I don't want to say it made me sympathetic to Jay Leno because I don't really like Jay Leno. I think he's kind of a hack, even though he was a successful guy. He hosted the Tonight Show for years. But the book makes it pretty clear that it wasn't really his idea to leave the show and come back. Basically, NBC sort of forced him out of the Tonight Show. And then they gave him his own show before Conan. It was called like the Jay Leno Show because they were worried he would jump to like Fox or CBS, or he would jump to a different network and be a competition to them. So NBC was like, how do we keep Jay Leno from being competition? We'll give him his own show before Conan. And it wasn't like Jay Leno came up with that idea. It was like, I want this show. And the same sort of thing happened where they got nervous about Conan's ratings. They were like, all right, what are we going to do? Let's just give Jay Leno the show back. It wasn't like that was Jay Leno's idea. So you can't really blame Jay Leno for that, but he could have, of course, been like, no, I'm not taking the show back. That would be a shitty thing to do. And obviously he did not do that. He always wanted to keep hosting the Tonight Show. And when they were like, all right, we want to give you the show back, he was like, that's fine by me, give me the show back. And Conan O'Brien, got kicked in the curb. Eventually Conan O'Brien went to TBS, and, he has his own like podcast now and all this. So, Conan O'Brien ultimately, I think, was seen as not the winner because he didn't win. He got kicked out, but he was seen as the more,
he had like the moral high ground.
Yeah, he had the moral high ground. Everyone's, and I feel like if you ask most people who's funnier, Conan O'Brien or Jay Leno, they're gonna say Conan O'Brien. Like I feel like people like in their 70s would say like Jay Leno, but other than that, people prefer Conan O'Brien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I've not read this book. I want to say Jacob read this book and talked about it a little bit on the podcast before. I mean, hearing you talk about it really makes me want to read it because I was paying attention to all that stuff. And I remember hearing reports of, some of the behind the scenes stuff with the executives making those decisions that you're talking about, but I did not do like a deep dive at the time. I was like very, I felt aggrieved on behalf of Conan. Like
Yeah.
looking back, it feels a little silly because there are so many more important things in the world for me to have been aggrieved about. But this was like, I don't know, it was 2009, right? 2010,
Yeah.
maybe, like right around there. And I felt like a different person now when I look back at that version of myself. But I remember being like really upset and being like, this is like an injustice that has occurred here, and like on one level it is, but like on another level, I probably should have chilled out a little bit and like maybe put my efforts elsewhere. But yeah, this sounds like a fascinating sort of behind the scenes thing, because you never really, if I never feel like we really get the true story of what's going on in a lot of these, the entertainment industry is famously so opaque. There's all,
Yeah.
people are always like, oh yeah, we just had differences of opinion about this project, and I'm like, there's a story there, somebody's just not telling it right now. So
Yeah. And
it's
he's
always
got
cool.
the cool thing about this book too is that like it's not like gossipy, because you can tell he got like direct quotes from like Conan and stuff like that. Like he doesn't like come right out and say it, but like he says things that like absolutely only Conan would know. Like there's no way he would have this information unless Conan like specifically gave him the info. So
Mhm.
it's really good insider stuff. And now that I've read it, I'm gonna finally go back and reread, and not reread, but read the Late Shift, which is the Letterman Leno book, because I really like the way this was written, and I want to know more about that.
Did you ever see that HBO movie that you mentioned?
You watch it when it came out. I remember it came out in the '90s, and I don't want to say it's good, but I remember being fascinated by it when it came out, because it was like, oh shit, this is cool. And
Yeah.
Kathy
I
Bates.
was I was scrolling through the Max library one day and saw it on there, and I was like, "Huh, I wonder if I should watch this." But I've literally never heard anybody talk about it, so I wonder if that means it's probably not great. But
It's
um,
weird. It's a weird movie to watch, because it's like Jay Leno and David Letterman are so well known, and to watch actors like play them, like the actor who plays Jay Leno is like I think it's like Daniel Roebuck is his name, and he's been in a lot of stuff, but he's like wearing this like fake chin, and it's really obvious looking. It's like, this is distracting. This is just very strange.
okay, so the book is called The War for Late Night, and it's written by
Yeah.
Bill Carter. Yeah, that sounds great. So let's get into what we've been watching. I watched a movie called The Crybaby Killer, which is a bad movie, Chris.
Okay.
It is Jack Nicholson's first movie. Have you ever seen this by any
No,
chance?
I have not seen this now.
It seems very obscure. It was very obscure to me. I'd never heard of it before. It's Nicholson's first movie. It's a starring role. It's produced by Roger Corman, who died earlier this week, and Ryan and I talked about him on the episode the other day. But it does not have the sort of exploitation elements that you might expect from a typical Roger Corman movie. Instead, it feels like an early teenager movie, like a precursor to American Graffiti, where teens are hanging out at their local diner, and there's a bad apple who's moving in on a nice girl, and he has this like goon who does that obnoxious cloying, like, yeah boss, yeah, kind of thing, where he like hangs on to every word the bad guy says.
Yeah.
So the thrust of the story is that Nicholson plays this guy who likes this nice girl, and now she's with this gang leader figure, and the guys have a confrontation in the parking lot, and a gun goes off, and Nicholson thinks that he's accidentally murdered at least one person, maybe two. And when the cops show up, he still has the gun in his hand, and he panics, and he takes a few hostages and boards himself up in a storeroom that is right next to the restaurant. And the whole rest of the movie is about this rising tension of like, oh my God, what is this? What's going to happen to this kid? What is he going to do? And like the news shows up, and it becomes like this big public event. And there's like a crowd gathering, and like the family of of some of the hostages and the family of Jack Nicholson's character are all there, and they're trying to talk to him through a bullhorn. It becomes like this big thing. I won't outright spoil the ending, but I found it to be like incredibly anticlimactic. So I was very disappointed by that. Yeah, so much so that like, even though this movie is only an hour and 2 minutes long, which I was like, hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I
Yeah.
actually would not recommend watching it unless you're a big Jack Nicholson completionist or something. He's raw and like nervy in this movie, but I wouldn't say
He's
it's
not
one of
like
those
good.
performances. Yeah, that's really good. Or even that, like, you could sometimes people have that X factor right from the start, and you can kind of see like, oh man, this person's going to be like a megastar.
Yeah.
And I think for Nicholson, it just took him a little while to develop that and really come into his own as a performer. So I would not recommend The Crybaby Killer. Also, and Chris, this might be something that would interest you. It has a totally insane theme song where like this guy from this movie came out in 1958, by the way. And so this theme song is very 1950s. And it is just like this guy doing like the cheesiest, like, uh, not quite Sinatra, but like weird crooning, sort of bouncing theme song where he's like, cry, baby, baby, cry, cry, cry. And it's just like totally nuts. And it will sort of worm its way into your head and drive you
Now I am
totally
going to
insane.
watch this. You've sold me on the movie. Now that I know there's a theme song,
I mean, I would maybe save yourself.
Maybe I'll just look up the theme song on
Yeah.
YouTube. I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Yeah, just check that on YouTube and save yourself the rest of the 58 minutes or whatever. But if you do want to watch The Crybaby Killer, it is streaming on Tubi right now. One other thing I've been catching up with is the Righteous Gemstones, the HBO show. Do you watch this show, Chris?
I did. When I finished Succession, I was like, I need another show to watch. So I burned through all 3 seasons of the show.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that now. This is great. I really love this show. I thought it was going to be kind of like a ridiculously over the top, really goofy comedy, and it does have moments like that. But I was surprised that it's actually kind of more of a drama than I was expecting. And I think so far it's been very successful at balancing those two aspects. I watched the show not only for the jokes and stuff like I do with some comedy shows, but because I'm actually engaged in like what's going on in the plot and the little mysteries and stuff that pop up along the way. I think the whole cast is really good. John Goodman brings some pathos as like the patriarch of this like ultra religious, what would you call them, like a super church or whatever, pastor family.
They're like televangelists.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And Walton Goggins is just like, he delivers
so good.
some really laugh out loud moments as this sort of like larger than life uncle character. But I think my favorite characters are the trio of siblings at the center of the show. Jesse's Gemstone, to me, feels like the role that Danny McBride was pretty much born to play. He is just like unreal, like on fire in the show. His delivery is just so funny. I mean, I've been kind of mixed on Danny McBride over the years, but this is like him, really in the pocket, just like operating at peak Danny McBride-ness in a way that that does not annoy me. And sometimes some of his performances can kind of get under my skin a little bit. And same thing actually with Adam Devine, who plays Kelvin, his brother. This is my favorite Adam Devine character and performance of anything that I've seen him in. I think he's really great in this too. And then Edie Patterson, who I was not really familiar with, is fantastic as Judy. I was looking up her filmography and I was like, what? She was in Knives Out? Like and she's been in like a couple things that I've seen, but I just like, she didn't really make much of an impression on me, but she has so much to do as this character, Judy, the lone sister in this gemstone clan. And she's just so funny. Like she's very, she has her own sort of like larger than life personality that really comes through really well in the show. So and I finished the first season, I think last night or the night before, and I'm sort of savoring the show. I don't want to like burn through it too quickly because I would love to sort of stretch it out a little bit because I think the show's coming back, right? There's going to be like
there's going to be a 4th season. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I can sort of time it where I catch up with season 3 right before the 4th season comes out or something. But that's the Righteous Gemstones, which I'm really having a lot of fun with, and that's on Max right now. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is I watched the first episode of the Netflix. I don't even know what you want to call this. It's
talk show.
Yeah, Everybody's in LA. Did you see any of this?
I have not watched this yet, even though I love John Mulaney. I have not actually watched it yet.
It is so bizarre, Chris. Like I'm curious what you make of it because it's just, it looks like a late night show. It kind of has the trappings of a late night show. Richard Kind is like the Andy Richter figure, like the sort of like guy off to the side that Mulaney bounces off of as the host. But it is so awkward. It's like such a strange show because Mulaney comes out and he introduces the concept of the show. And for those who don't know, this was the thing that they were doing. I think they did 6 total episodes of it, and it was for the Netflix is a Joke festival that was happening in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, I think. And because all of these comedians were in town, Mulaney decided to, through Netflix, to put on this show where he was able to sort of interview a bunch of these people who are all in town at the same time. It reminds me of the Greatest Night in Pop, how like all of the mega singers and stuff were in town, so that's how they got everybody to record "We Are the World."
Yeah.
And so he explains the show, and then he does like this really long monologue about different areas of LA and stuff like that, and making jokes about them. And I thought it was great because I lived there for 11 years and I thought it was like really, really funny, but I'm not sure how well those really hyper specific jokes landed for everybody else. And then the weird part about the show is that he has interviews with celebrities and real people. But because the celebrity doesn't really have anything specific to plug, it just kind of has this feeling of like, what exactly are we doing here? And then the real people kind of feel like they're in over their head a little bit, and they're kind of like starstruck and kind of, I don't know. The first episode is ostensibly about coyotes, and so one of the normal people that Mulaney has on is this guy who's like a coyote expert who works for like an organization for preservation of coyotes or something like that in LA, and he's sitting on the couch next to Jerry Seinfeld, and it's just like the chemistry between these people is just so strange. And the show doesn't really have like the rigid format that a lot of typical talk shows have, so you're not really able to like kind of get that sense of like, oh, okay, well, I know that this is awkward right now, but it's only going to last 3 more minutes because they have to throw to commercial or something. Those guide rails are like that safety net has been removed almost from this experiment. So it's a really bizarre show. I like Mulaney a lot, and I think when he's like cooking during the monologue segments and stuff like that, that's when the show is at its best. But I feel like he appreciates the weirdness of the show and that sort of awkwardness and kind of leans into it a little bit. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go back and like watch the remaining 5 episodes, but I would love to know from our listeners if anybody watched all of these. And they were actually doing them live on Netflix at the time, and they had like people calling in and stuff like that. So it was an interesting experiment, and I wonder if they're trying to tee up Mulaney for maybe getting into like a regular late night type of show for Netflix or something like that. So we'll have to see. But anyway, Everybody's in LA is what it's called, and it's on Netflix right now. Chris, what have you been watching?
So I finally saw Madam Web, the infamous Madam Web, which is part of Sony's Spider-Man universe that does not have Spider-Man in it. And man, everything you've heard about this movie is true. It is, it is not. It's like shockingly bad. Like it feels like something like wrong. Like something went very wrong, and they released like rehearsal footage instead of the actual movie. And like the entire time I was just like watching it being like, what, why is this so bad? Like it's like befuddlingly bad. It's like Dakota Johnson, who I think is a good actress, is like terrible. Like every line she reads like she's seeing it for the first time. Like I don't, it's just like it's like shockingly bad. And
Yeah.
like I was just like I don't know. I don't even know what else can you say about that movie at this point. Like they're like every line is like clunky. No one is doing a good job in the movie. Like the villain is just like this boring guy who is sort of like Spider-Man but not really. And I don't know. It's like I don't know. I watched this like stunned at how like not good it was. It was just like it felt inept. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like, nothing works in this movie. Like not even like I guess it looks okay.
Yeah,
it's not,
that's the weird part about it to me, is that it has this sort of it's clearly made by professionals. It has like a look where it's like, this doesn't look like, I mean, to bring up his name again, like a Roger Corman type of movie where like they clearly have a shoestring budget and like the lighting just isn't quite there, but they're just snatching shots because they got to make their days and just like get whatever they're doing. Like they have like professional setups and like camera moves and stuff like that. So it's really disorienting to see a movie that has such terrible quality story wise and performance wise and everything with that look to it.
Like they shot on location, and you can tell like if you compare this to like Spider-Man Far From Home, where like everyone looks like they're in like in front of a green screen. Like this movie does not look like that, but everything else is terrible. It's like they got one thing right, and then everything else is like let's not bother. I don't know. I'm dying. Like it also feels like a movie that was like heavily edited. Like I just know there was like a longer, I don't want to say better, but there's a longer, different cut that probably feels more like a real movie than whatever this is.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I hope the spoilers were worth it, Mom. That's all I can say.
Yeah, in its current form, it just kind of feels like a money laundering excuse or something.
Yeah,
Like I have no idea, yeah, how a major
but
studio would release that in
they just
2024.
added it to Netflix today. So if you too want to see Madam Web, listener, today's your day. Go watch it on Netflix and be amazed.
Okay, so you also caught up with the idea of you.
Yeah, this is the Harry Styles fan fiction about a divorced woman played by Anne Hathaway. She goes to Coachella and she happened in a very have you seen the movie?
Yes, I saw it.
Yeah, so the way they meet seems very unbelievable to me, but you know what? This is a charming movie, and Anne Hathaway is acting her ass off in this movie. Holy shit! Like when I watched this, I was just like, she is really going for it. She's like crying and she's like selling the drama. Like this is being billed as a rom com, and it's really not that funny. Like it's like I was taken aback at how like genuinely emotional it is, and how they're like really leaning into the romance of it, and
Mhm.
like the sex scenes are genuinely sexy, which is weird because Michael Showalter directed it, and I can't imagine like Michael Showalter doing sexy stuff. So it's like, what's this? Like, I don't know how to process this movie, but I thought this was pretty damn good. Anne Hathaway really sells the movie. Like, if she wasn't in it, it would not be as successful as it ultimately is. It's it's light and it's frothy, but it's also has like oddly serious stuff in it for the type of movie it is. And, so she falls in love with a boy band guy, and they have this whirlwind romance, and he like jets her off around the world, and then like reality comes crashing in. The reality of being a normal person dating a famous person is I've never done that, but I imagine it's surreal and it's not normal. And so I gotta say I like this mostly for Anne Hathaway, but I've always been an Anne Hathaway fan. There was that weird period where people turned against Anne Hathaway because I guess she likes her job, which is like a weird thing. People for some reason like that became the narrative. Like we hate Anne Hathaway because she's passionate about her work, and it's like what a strange thing to hate someone for, like someone who like likes their work and she's good at it. Anne Hathaway is a good actress. I've never watched an Anne Hathaway movie and been like, boy, she sucked in that. I think she's always delivering, and she's really delivering in this movie. Like she could have phoned this in and cashed a check, and she's not. She's really going. She's given like awards caliber performances in this movie.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think Brad and I talked about it on the episode where he featured the interview that he did with Michael Showalter, and we both enjoyed it too. So I'm glad that we're across the board. The idea of you has the Slash Film Daily seal of approval so
Yeah,
far. So that's awesome. So that movie is available on Prime Video if you want to stream that right now.
yeah.
What else have you been watching, Chris?
I saw the TV Glow, it's called, which is in a select city. I think it's one of those. It's an A24 movie. They're slowly rolling it out, and
Man, I'm so jealous. I was just looking at my local AMC because it's supposed to be opening wide this Friday and it's not playing anywhere near me. And it doesn't seem to be scheduled to play anywhere near me, like at all. And I'm like, oh my God, like AMC, get your shit together. I want to see this freaking movie. I've heard so many things about it. So what do you think about it?
man, I don't want to oversell this, but this is like my number one movie of the year right now.
Oh,
This
God,
is
heartbreaking. Okay, well,
this like
I'm happy for you.
this movie like absolutely floored me. Like even like it already has a lot of hype because it played at Sundance, and a lot of people at Sundance were just like, "This is amazing," and I was like, "I'll be the judge of that." And it really is just a stunning, emotional, it's almost unclassifiable sort of coming of age horror drama movie about identity. It's just it's not easy to pin down, but it's a really raw emotional movie. And like when it ended, I was like, I'm like in shock after this movie. Like it like really shook me up, and like I had to like watch something really light and silly to like take my mind off it for, because I was so like emotionally like exhausted from it's just like it goes to some really unique places. And I don't want to say too much about it because I know a lot of people have not seen this yet because it's not out everywhere yet. So I don't want to spoil anything. But it's really like if you've heard this movie is good, it's as good as people are saying it is. It's probably better than that. Like I know it's only, what is it? What is it? May? It's May. I don't, I'm sure I'll see better movies this year that might jump up to the top of my list. But right now, like this is number one for me. I can't imagine. It's a unique, wholly original sort of film. Like I never, I don't want to, I don't. I'm trying really hard not to
I
become
know.
hyperbolic and be like, I've never seen anything like this, but it really feels unlike anything I've seen before. It's just like a stunning singular work.
Amazing. Okay, so that's called I Saw the TV Glow. Check your local listings. I might, I don't know, lead some sort of campaign against my local AMC to get them to show it because that's the only theater near me. And maybe I'll have to like drive a couple hours away or something to go see it because it sounds like it's worth the trek. So, okay, yeah, stay tuned for that one, which hopefully opens wide near you in theaters this Friday. And then
They're rolling it out. I don't know. I hate when. Can we get rid of this model? Can we get rid of the select theater model? It's the 21st century. Let's go. Release everything at once.
Yeah, I know that like distributors have their reasons and they see the numbers and know that like certain things do well with that stuff. It's just like it's always so frustrating when you're on the end of that rollout where you're the last person that the rollout hits, you know? So that's really kind of a bummer that they're going this way. But I hope this movie does well for what they hope it's going to do. I mean, it certainly does not seem like it has like blockbuster potential or anything. It's not that kind of movie, but
no.
I hope it at least does well enough to keep James Schoenbrunn, the director, to give them an opportunity to make another movie sometime soon, because it sounds like they definitely deserve it after this one. So, okay, you watched one other thing that you wanted to talk about, Chris.
Yes, I finally saw Godzilla -1. I did not get to see this when it was in theaters. I'm not going to tell you how I saw it, but let's just say I did not see this legally, because right now there's no, I don't want to advocate for bootlegging, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And right now there's like no US release plan for this movie for like home video. There's like, it's streaming on Amazon Japan, which obviously I don't have. Other than that, there's literally no way to watch this movie right now. And I got sick of being not able to see it. And I wanted to see it because I missed it in theaters. So I finally watched it, and good movie. Good Godzilla -1, good movie. It reminded me a lot of The Dark Knight, not in content, but in the way it's presented. The Dark Knight. When I saw The Dark Knight, it was like, oh, this is like an actual crime movie that just happens to have Batman in it. And Godzilla -1 feels like a World War II movie that just happens to have Godzilla in it. Like that's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just like this it feels like, for lack of a better term, a real movie. Like no offense to Godzilla movies, I love Godzilla movies, but they're not like serious films, for lack of a better phrase. And this feels like someone trying to make a serious movie that just happens to feature Godzilla. And it's surprisingly emotional. It's funny. The special effects are really good for the low budget they had. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I know it was not like a huge budget movie. So I really dug this. I hope it gets a US Blu-ray release. I know Janus Films is working on it, and they work with the Criterion Collection, so I have a feeling it's going to end up in the Criterion Collection at some point, but I have no idea when. So for now, you could, hint, find it. It's out there if you want to find it.
Yeah, I hope Criterion releases it, and maybe they'll put out like both versions of it, because I think there was a black and white cut or something that was in theaters for a little while too. That would be cool for them to do. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, because like Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Did you see that movie?
I have not seen that yet. I'll see it when it gets on Blu-ray.
I feel like that's a pretty fun movie. It's real dumb, but like in a fun way, I thought. And that's not really a movie that's kind of about anything. Like maybe it has like one or two little ideas sort of bouncing around in its head, but it's mostly just an excuse to see these giant monsters punch each other, which is fine. And like I had fun watching it. But yeah, to piggyback off what you're saying, like Godzilla -1 actually feels like maybe just another way of calling it a real movie is to say that it actually has things on its mind, and like things that it wants to say, and themes that it's trying to get across, and like ideas it wants you to engage with as an audience. Whereas like a lot of the Godzilla stuff that I've seen does not have that ambition. And it's not necessarily saying one is better than the other, but it's different. And it's interesting that Godzilla -1 can exist alongside the MonsterVerse stuff, which is a little bit emptier and sort of more like popcorn fare. So Yeah, just really cool stuff. Did you have like a favorite moment of Godzilla minus one? I love that part on the beach in the beginning where Godzilla like stomps all those guys, and it's just like he seems so scary in that moment.
Yeah, I do love that the way they found a way to make Godzilla seem terrifying. Like there's that scene where they're being chased by Godzilla on the boat, and they keep like launching like not landmines, what are they? Just mines, I guess, at him, and he
Hmm.
keeps like coming, and they're just like they're not working. They're like shooting at him, and his head is sticking out of the water, and he just keeps coming at. I was like, this is so friggin' cool, and I don't want to give away spoilers, but the very last line of the movie like hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is like weirdly emotional for a Godzilla movie. Like
Yeah.
it has like a shockingly emotional ending for a movie about Godzilla. So Godzilla minus one, good movie.
Good stuff. Okay, well, you can find more about all of the movies that we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com. I will try to link to a few things in the show notes as well. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really does help us out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.
Cry, baby, baby, cry, cry, cry. Cry, baby, baby, cry, cry, cry. All began on a bleak black day. For all his wrongs he had to pay. Search for a happiness that couldn't be. The bleak black day was all that he could see. Go cry, baby.